Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to the last panel of today's conference. It's not always the easiest to be chairing the last panel of a conference, but this time it's not going to be too difficult because I have here truly inspiring participants. But first and foremost, I would like to thank the Holy See, the Pontifical Academy of Sciences in particular, and to the Holy Father, of course, for so graciously inviting us here at a time of great consequence and also at the time of great leadership of the Holy See. I come from Serbia. I served in the Serbian government for a number of years, and in the year 2012 I was elected President of the General Assembly of the United Nations. And at a time when I was elected, didn't really understand that the post-2015 agenda and the start of the Sustainable Development Goals building process was going to be my responsibility. I started my term right after the Rio +20 conference, which actually handed over the mandate for the creation of the SDGs of the post-2015 development agenda to the General Assembly. General Assembly is not the easiest and the most harmonious body in the world, certainly not these days. But we somehow did push and start a certain process that is culminating this September. A lot of speakers talked about it, and in a probably much more eloquent way than I'd be ever in a position to do so. I'm just going to very, very quickly say that the 11th goal, the Urban Sustainable Development Goal, I believe is not the only thing to do with the urban leaders, with the local leaders. I think that the entire Sustainable Development Agenda is to a great extent going to fall down to the local leaders and to the local authorities, not only because vast majority of humanity is going to live in cities in the coming decades, not only because there is a vast concentration of economic activities in the cities, it's because, the way we live and the way we interact and communicate with each other is increasingly going to be down to the level of governments and to the level of governance, if you will, that we are having with us here at the conference this afternoon. Once again, before I introduce our panelists, I'm going to say how grateful I am for the leadership of the Holy Father and for the Laudato Si, which I believe is going to be remembered in history as one of the great documents of our era, one of the leadership, one of the demonstrations of leadership that is going to be remembered in the years to come. It also gives me a particular personal pleasure that in Laudato Si, the Patriarch of the Orthodox Church, His All Holiness Bartholomeus, who's been for about 20 years on the forefront of international global leadership when it comes to environmental stewardship, has been mentioned by the Holy Father in a way that I really believe is appropriate. Well, without too much further of my talking, I'd like to introduce the first panelist of today. We are fortunate to have Mayor Fortunati with us, José Fortunati, Mayor of Porto Alegre from Brazil. He was elected in 2012, for the last time he was elected 2012, but he had served as mayor since 2010. He in 2006, he took over as a municipal secretary of planning, and he spearheaded at this position the city's new master plan for environmental development. He's a strong proponent of city-to-city cooperation and south-south cooperation. And in one of his interviews that I read, he encapsulated some of his life philosophy in a Chinese proverb. And he said, there are three things in life which cannot come back: the spent arrow, the spoken word, and the lost opportunity. So I think that addresses, in a way, what we have gathered here to discuss. And as a mayor of a city that is considered a success story of Latin America, as a city that is not suffering from the difficulties of a majority of cities in that part of the world are suffering, as a true representative of a success story, the floor is yours, Mr. Mayor.
Boa tarde a todos. Eu gostaria de, em meu nome, em nome do deputado, do prefeito Márcio Lacerda de Belo Horizonte, do prefeito Gustavo Fruit de Curitiba, em nome da vice-prefeita Célia Sacramento de Salvador, em nome da deputada estadual, minha esposa, Regina Becker, de cumprimentar a todos, dizer que a Frente Nacional de Prefeitos se sente muito honrada em participar desse importante seminário. Um seminário que, indiscutivelmente, reforça toda a visão do debate que tivemos ontem em torno da encíclica papal Laudato Si. O Papa fala de uma forma muito correta na chamada ecologia humana. Então, se queremos pensar cidades sustentáveis, obrigatoriamente temos que pensar nesse binômio. Como trabalharmos a questão ambiental e, ao mesmo tempo, protegermos, especialmente as populações que mais precisam das políticas públicas, a partir da gestão dos prefeitos e prefeitas de cada uma das localidades do mundo. Nós sabemos que, hoje, o grande problema que todos enfrentamos, especialmente na América do Sul, no Brasil, dentro desse contexto, nos países africanos e nas cidades africanas, nas cidades asiáticas e em muitas cidades da Europa, é a questão do financiamento. De que forma podemos traduzir as políticas públicas através de um financiamento adequado. Podemos ter boas ideias, bons propósitos, excelentes projetos, mas se não tivermos fontes de financiamento que ajudem a retirar do papel e a colocar no dia a dia da sociedade, nós ficaremos simplesmente com boas intenções, sem mudarmos a vida das pessoas, especialmente daquelas, volto a dizer, que mais precisam das políticas públicas emanadas pelos gestores públicos municipais. Por isso, quero falar um pouco deste processo do financiamento das cidades a partir da ótica de quem vive na cidade. Tivemos um governador, o governador Franco Montoro, que dizia: ninguém vive na União, ninguém vive no Estado, as pessoas vivem no município. Na verdade, a União e o Estado são entes abstratos. O município é um ente concreto. As pessoas buscam realizar as suas satisfações, a busca das suas demandas nas cidades. É lá que as pessoas querem o atendimento à saúde, uma mobilidade urbana adequada, uma ecologia de forma adequada e assim por diante. Por isso é importante que a gente perceba que cada vez mais as cidades ganham um protagonismo internacional. E a prova está o convite que o Papa Francisco fez no dia de ontem aos 64 prefeitos que aqui estão. O grande problema que todos nós enfrentamos, gestores públicos municipais, é que nós temos uma crescente demanda por serviços. Novas responsabilidades a cada dia são assumidas pelos prefeitos e prefeitas. Junto com isso, temos um crescimento, isso já foi falado em vários dos painéis que fizemos parte no dia de hoje, um crescimento habitacional muito forte das nossas cidades, a partir de êxodos, especialmente no Brasil, o êxodo rural, que foi muito forte na década de 70, isso também acontece em outros países, e com uma queda do financiamento. A crise econômica, que é mundial, ela acabou retirando muitos recursos que os municípios dispunham e que agora não dispõem mais. Por isso, temos que discutir de que forma nós buscamos fontes para atendermos a área da saúde pública, algo fundamental para que a chamada ecologia humana possa ser satisfeita no dia a dia, porque a saúde pública lida com a vida. Como é que nós tratamos com os moradores de rua? Iluminação, segurança, a questão da geração de emprego, espaços urbanos, fazendo com que os espaços urbanos cada vez mais possam ser qualificados para que a população possa usufruir desses espaços urbanos. Uma educação pública de qualidade. Não basta levarmos as crianças às escolas, mas temos que levá-las às escolas com uma educação pública de qualidade. A reciclagem do lixo, especialmente dos resíduos sólidos, saneamento e assim por diante. Nós sabemos, e o Brasil, nisto, é um exemplo muito claro, de que a migração interna, a partir do êxodo rural, acabou concentrando a população nas grandes cidades. Se nós olharmos o caso de Salvador, na Bahia, Belo Horizonte, Minas Gerais, São Paulo, Porto Alegre, o crescimento das nossas cidades se deu especialmente a partir da década de 70, quando as pequenas propriedades acabaram sendo dizimadas e o latifúndio começou a tomar conta das propriedades rurais. Consequentemente, há uma grande aglomeração de pessoas sem que a cidade tivesse se preparado para isso. Por isso, nós temos que discutir como atacarmos exatamente esse problema. Se, de um lado, há um crescimento da população, do outro lado, nós percebemos, e este é o caso brasileiro, de que os recursos que os municípios dispõem, eles são os menores entre os 3 entes federados. A União, que engloba, obviamente, o país como um todo, fica com 60% no Brasil de toda a arrecadação tributária, de todos os tributos. Os estados ou províncias ficam com 25%, e os municípios que acabam atendendo essas demandas da população ficam com apenas 15%. É o que eu chamo as cidades na boca do jacaré. Ou seja, o lábio superior, quando a boca está aberta, apresenta a crescente demandas por serviços que a população tem. Cada dia que passa, mais e mais as cidades devem responder aos cidadãos pela prestação de serviços. Em contrapartida, o lábio inferior mostra a ida de recursos para os cofres municipais, cada vez menos. Ou seja, há um distanciamento cada vez maior entre a necessidade de atendermos as demandas por serviços e a vinda de recursos para que essas demandas possam ser atendidas. Como enfrentar esse desafio? Já que é muito difícil falarmos na busca de novas formas de financiamento. É claro que temos que ter, desde parcerias nacionais e internacionais, buscando formas criativas. Mas nós sabemos que isto tem um limite. Por isso, defendemos, primeiro, uma gestão eficiente, para que a gente possa utilizar de uma forma adequada os recursos públicos que são do povo, para que volte de uma forma adequada. Cooperação entre o poder central e as cidades. No Brasil, temos um exemplo muito claro, foi muito exitoso, chamado Programa Mais Médicos. Até bem pouco tempo atrás, as grandes cidades, como a minha, Salvador, Belo Horizonte, Curitiba, ou pequenas cidades muito afastadas, nós, nas grandes cidades, não tínhamos médicos na periferia para atender a população mais pobre. E cidades mais distantes não tinham sequer um médico. Fizemos uma parceria com o governo federal acabou, entre aspas, importando médicos. Hoje temos no Brasil médicos cubanos, médicos argentinos, aqui da França, até em Porto Alegre, temos médicos do mundo todo nesta parceria entre o governo federal brasileiro com os municípios brasileiros. Mas, para mim, uma das metodologias mais adequadas para que, dentro de um contexto de aperto fiscal e tributário, como é que nós podemos utilizar melhor esses recursos? Indiscutivelmente, nós defendemos a participação do cidadão. Ou seja, a participação do cidadão não cria recursos, mas certamente otimiza, qualifica a realização dos investimentos que nós temos que fazer nas nossas cidades. Não se muda esse quadro sem a participação ativa do cidadão. Se de um lado há poucos recursos financeiros e de outro lado muita demanda para ser atendida, é fundamental que o poder público, o gestor público, dialogue com o cidadão de forma muito clara. Por isso, lá em Porto Alegre, há 25 anos, estamos indo para o 26º ano, criamos o orçamento participativo. O orçamento participativo ele existe há 26 anos, há 25 anos. No ano passado, nós conseguimos a maior participação popular de toda a história do orçamento participativo em Porto Alegre, mostrando que é um instrumento que se mantém forte e atualizado. É uma forma de desnudarmos, de abrirmos os dados do orçamento público municipal, discutirmos com as pessoas, as mais simples, especialmente as mais simples, de que forma os recursos que a Prefeitura tem nas suas mãos, de onde é que vêm esses recursos, quem é que contribui para formar esse orçamento. E, de outro lado, pensar com a população a melhor forma de investirmos esses recursos lá na ponta, para que a própria população saiba de que, naturalmente, há uma escassez de recursos e, ao mesmo tempo, temos que atender às demandas. E essa conta matemática, ela tem que fechar. O orçamento participativo é uma marca de Porto Alegre, já foi considerado pela ONU como uma das melhores 40 práticas de gestão pública do mundo. O Banco Mundial reconhece o processo de participação popular de Porto Alegre como um exemplo bem-sucedido de ação comum entre governo e sociedade civil. Aqui ontem tivemos dois prefeitos, o prefeito de Matola e de Nampula, em Moçambique, que também falaram sobre o orçamento participativo que tem crescido no mundo como um todo. O que significa o OP? Orçamento participativo, governo e população definindo junto as prioridades. O governo não abre mão do seu poder. O governo, na verdade, socializa, democratiza o seu poder para que, em conjunto, se possa definir exatamente quais são as prioridades que o município tem e que podem e que venham a ser atendidas pelo montante de recursos que os gestores públicos municipais têm nas suas mãos. Então, nós, a partir desses encontros, definimos se devemos construir creches para as nossas crianças, temos que construir unidades de triagem. Porto Alegre decidiu, pelo orçamento participativo, investir fortemente na coleta de resíduos sólidos. Nós temos hoje 19 unidades de triagem que, a partir da busca do nosso lixo reciclável, alimenta hoje 800 escatadores que trabalham em cooperativas nas 19 unidades de triagem. Tudo isso fruto do orçamento participativo. Saneamento básico. Estamos fazendo uma grande obra de saneamento básico. Nós tratávamos apenas 27% do esgoto cloacal da cidade. Neste ano estamos chegando a 80%, graças a decisões tomadas pelo orçamento participativo. Unidade de pronto atendimento e assim por diante. Tudo é decidido em conjunto com a comunidade. O prefeito não decide nada de forma isolada. Eu sei que isto choca quem não faz o processo, mas eu posso garantir a vocês, eu que acompanho o orçamento participativo desde 1989 em Porto Alegre, de que nesses 25 anos a cidade mudou, e mudou para melhor, porque ninguém melhor do que o cidadão que mora lá na ponta, na Vila Popular, lá onde as necessidades existem, para poder apontar quais são as principais necessidades. Muitas vezes, nós, governantes que somos eleitos, ficamos arrogantes, achando que temos a solução mágica para tudo, e que conhecemos plenamente as necessidades do nosso povo. Isto é verdadeiro em parte. Nós temos conhecimento, nos preparamos para tanto. Mas ninguém melhor do que o cidadão que mora lá na vila, lá na favela, para dizer exatamente o que é mais importante para a sua vida. Por isso, nós, nessa discussão, sobre o aumento das demandas, a busca do financiamento para que as cidades tenham governança, a cidade de Porto Alegre apresenta como uma das alternativas a chamada democracia popular, democracia participativa, através do orçamento participativo. Obrigado.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. It was an amazing presentation, and thanks for this sharing with us this participatory budgeting, the participatory democracy that you're practicing in Porto Alegre. Allow me now to move on to Dr. Angela Brown Burke, Mayor of Kingston, Jamaica. She's been mayor and as well as the deputy president of the Jamaican Senate since 2012. She is also vice president of the People's National Party. She holds a PhD in adult educational literacy from National Louis University in Chicago. And I don't know if you remember, but the doctoral committee said of your thesis, her work is remarkable, both for the action it produced and for its insights into collaborative decision making. Well, obviously, a lot of people now in Kingston also believe that you're doing an amazing work in a city that represents about 40% of Jamaica's economy. 40% of Jamaica's population and 80% of economic activity. And if there is any place where it's going to become obvious that success in sustainable development delivery means delivering in an urban area and an island state, which are, as we all know, particularly vulnerable to what lies ahead, for us as humanity, it's Dr. Brown Burke, Mayor of Kingston, who are going to share this experiences with us. Thank you.
Thank you very much. It's on? So hi, my name is Angela Brown Burke, as you have heard, Mayor of Kingston, and I'm also one of the vice presidents of the Global Alliance with specific responsibility for the Caribbean. And I am extremely delighted to be here this afternoon, and I wanted to thank Monsignor Sanchez Sorondo, the Holy See, the individuals in the Pontifical Academy of Sciences and Social Sciences, as well as Professor Jeffrey Sachs for the work that they are doing. I start by saying that Kingston is an island, of course surrounded by water. That's what an island is. And our day-to-day activities are extremely interrelated with changes in terms of climatic conditions. Our major areas of trade and economic activity include tourism, farming, fishing, and all of these, as you would imagine, are climate sensitive. Just last week, I was talking with an individual. We went to the market and she was saying, oh, you know, I saw Miss Agnes and she was kind of sad because we're experiencing the worst drought we've had for 50 years. And she wasn't certain what was going to happen the following week because she just didn't have much produce to buy, to come, to sell, to be able to earn a living. The following week, just as I was leaving, she wasn't there in the market. She wasn't there because she had nothing to buy because of the drought. And it started me thinking that where I live in Kingston, most of the individuals are worried about water because we are now down to water every other day because of the drought. We just don't have enough water in Kingston to do better than that. And we're worried about not being able to wash our cars because instead of using a hose, we're being told, let's use a pan because it uses less water. We're being told not to have our water parties where our kids get to slide down a water slide. But there are other individuals in Jamaica, in particular from the rural areas, who are talking about their livelihoods. They're not talking about these luxuries, they're talking about their livelihoods. And as I sat here listening to the discussion, I thought that the whole discussions we've been having is really set up in that kind of a way as well, that we are all at different points on that continuum in the debate around climate change, around forced labor, and all of that. The video we had of Kiribati allowed, I believe, us to see a little bit, it's a little of the future of Jamaica, if it is that we do nothing, because we are totally surrounded by water. If we continue as we are, at some point in the future, I guess, we will be maybe up in the Blue Mountains, putting all our people together, training them for jobs overseas, because shortly we'll be fearing that there is no Jamaica. Thankfully, we are here today having some discussions that could hopefully cement the foundation and a platform for future action that could lead to a reversal. So I'm asked to talk about governance and financing. I wanted to begin this discussion about governance by saying that we are not all at the same place. And so in Jamaica, after 30, 40 years of local government reform, we are just now looking at placing local government in our constitution. We still have the challenge of determining exactly what are the functions that belong to local government as distinct from those that belong to central government. Certainly for us in Kingston, we're constantly, because we are in the capital, having the discussion about whose responsibility it is and who should be doing this or doing that. When I became mayor in 2012, I recognized that if we were to continue that debate, that would never get anything done. And so my approach is a very simple one, that it doesn't have to be my responsibility. If it happens in Kingston, it affects us in Kingston, and that's where I come in. And what that does is that it gives me the platform, certainly for cooperation and collaboration with just about whoever is in Kingston, with the Office of the Prime Minister, with any of the ministry, any of the agencies, or private sector community-based organizations. And so we have been able to get a lot done doing that. But more importantly, we are building that network, that alliance, because I don't know about the other countries, but certainly we operate in what I call a low trust environment, one where there is little confidence in politicians, and worst of all, little confidence in those of us at the local government level. And so you have to begin by building that trust so that as individuals who share that kind of trust, we can have those difficult discussions. Also, I'm one of those, I believe in conversations. Sometimes we say we talk too much. I'm the exact opposite. I believe we don't talk enough. I believe that often we rush to decisions without making sure that those of us at the table have the same idea and that we're talking about the same things. So when we agree to do something, we know that we're all on board. When we started in 2012, we agreed that one of the things we would do would be to have quarterly town hall meetings where we got individuals together. We would talk about the budget, we would talk about how we have spent the money, we would talk about what the priorities were and what the priorities are for the coming quarter, and we would look at exactly what was happening. We would invite agencies that were not local government agencies, but had business to do in Kingston, and we would talk about it. The first one we had, there were so many persons there. Jamaica is a place where we talk about Caribbean time, we talk about Jamaican time. So if it's to be at 6, we'll tell people 5 o'clock. Hopefully they'll be there by 6 and we could start at 6:30. And then the first one, we said 5:30 so we could start at 6. And I like to come early, so I came at 5:15 because I wanted to be able to have a discussion with some individuals. And when I came, the room was full, it was packed. People were there, they were ready for the discussion. And one of the things that taught me was that there are so many individuals who are waiting for that opportunity to engage us as elected officials and as leaders in the governance of their city and what affects them. We had a wonderful discussion. Individual citizens raised issues that they were concerned about, that they were angry about, that they were enthused about. The next morning, I saw a newspaper article that spoke about the tumultuous meeting that the Kingston and St. Andrew Corporation had with its citizens, where they were lambasted. And I'm like, was I there? Because that wasn't my experience. My experience was that there were individuals who were passionate about what was happening and who placed their issues on the table. So that's part of what I wanted to talk about, is what do we understand by governance? Because there are so many of us that when persons begin to talk and begin to express their opinions, we believe that's something wrong. No, that's something good, because it's when passions are involved that we know we are getting to the heart of what we need to talk about. So I place that there, and I also say that one of the things we really are trying to do is about inclusion. So when we did a tour of our markets, where 90% of those who are in the markets are women, and it's part of that 80% of the economic outputs of Kingston and St. Andrew, we recognized that we had done some improvement in terms of the physical infrastructure, but our bathrooms was just horrible. No one would want to have that bathroom in their homes. And I decided that we needed bathrooms where our women, many of whom are coming from the rural areas, spending overnight 3-4 days, where they could have a proper bath, where they could use a bathroom, and where they could feel dignified. The truth is, as you know me, it wasn't a decision I made on my own. It was a decision that was made based on the discussion and interaction with the vendors in the markets themselves about what were some of their priorities. You would be surprised to know how many persons thought that was a waste of time. More surprising were the individuals within the council who thought it was a waste of time. And as I thought about that, I recognized that some of us have the misfortune of having a two-party system. And when you have a two-party system, it changes the dynamics, because people are no longer rational. It's just two of us. And so if you are saying this, whether it's right or wrong, I need to say it's wrong, because that's the only way I'm going to be able to be where you are. And so part of what we have to do in this new governance framework that we want to establish is to be able to build a kind of alliance that puts those things in the background and that gets us to focus on the things that are really important. And I think one way of doing that and making sure it's always there is to make sure we are always engaging those we are supposed to be serving, those who have elected us to serve. And so that is where we are headed, and that's one of the things that we are doing. In terms of financing, back in 1997, when I first became involved in the local government movement, 25% of our funding was generated from local activities, own source revenue, dedicated funds to the local authority, and 75% came from central government. We have had a number of laws that have been passed, and where we are now is that close to 70% of our expenditure is funded through locally raised funds, either dedicated sources or from our own source revenue. And that has made a big difference. It has made a big difference because it allows us a little bit more financial autonomy in terms of decisions that we take. And so even with that, though, we have to reach out to others, because we are never able to do all we want to do with the little that we have. And so how we've been able to do it, if I take one program, our Poor Relief Program, which is where we have the outdoor poor and registered poor, and we have a very small budget to deal with them. In fact, the budget consists primarily for administrative purposes. We are only able to do what we do because we have reached out to our churches, to our community-based organizations, to private sector individuals, and to individuals, to our philanthropists. And they have been able to assist us. So we're able to do a fairly decent feeding program of the homeless. We're able to make sure we can serve them, doing tests, taking them to the hospital when they need to go to the hospital. A number of them have mental problems, and so we're able to do the assessment. We're able to reunite them with family so that their situation can be improved. We have found too that one of the programs that really, really works has to do with our school feeding program. So a number of the kids in school, we have problems with low attendance. Punctuality also is a problem. But where it is that we are able, through partnership, to provide, for example, a breakfast program, immediately attendance goes up because it's a sure meal for the day for many of them. They are more attentive in school. And so what that means also is that they are learning more and they're spending more time in school learning as opposed to some of the other things that they would normally do. So what it says, certainly what we've found, is that partnership is the only way to go. Try to do it by yourself is just not going to work. We have to reach out across the spectrum to other partners to allow us to deliver the programs that we have to deliver. I think that should be my couple minutes, and I hope that I've been able to give you an idea of some of the things that we do and some of the ways in which we are able to finance some of the programs that we do as well. Thank you.
As the mayor of San Francisco, the first Asian American elected to the office, if I understand well, and previously served as city administrator, champion of balancing budget whilst keeping San Francisco safe, solvent, and secure. San Francisco happens to be the highest ranked U.S. city when it comes to the Sustainable Cities Index, according to Sustainable Cities Index compiled by the London-based Center for Economics and Business Research. So we're talking about a #1 in America in this regard, and we're definitely talking about a capital of innovation of the United States and possibly of the whole world. It's an enormous privilege to have with us Mayor Lee. The floor is yours, sir.
Thank you, Vuk, and let me take the opportunity to add my appreciation to His Holiness for gathering all of you mayors and all of us to come together on the challenges of climate change and world slavery. I also want to take the opportunity to thank the Mayor of Rome for hosting us as well. If I can express what I think many of you have, that it was a wonderful time last night to appreciate the history of one of the greatest cities in the world and to understand its history so that it gave even more appreciation to our roles as mayors of our own great cities. I am thankful to join this illustrious panel, and I totally agree with the comments made just now that strong engagement of our public is absolutely necessary. I've had the privilege of working in my government for over 21 years before I became its mayor. And in those years, I watched other mayors struggle